A young man stood at the very top of a tall building, feeling tired and sad. It felt like the whole world was against him. He had worked so hard, but nothing seemed to go right. With a big sigh, he looked down at the ground far below, took a deep breath, and jumped. At first, the parachute opened up, and everything seemed to be going well. The wind caught the fabric, and for a moment, he felt like he might actually be safe. But then, out of nowhere, the wind grew stronger, and the ropes of the parachute began to twist. He tried to control it, but the parachute spun and jerked, throwing him off balance. Suddenly, he lost control and started to fall, faster and faster. As he tumbled through the air, the ground rushed up to meet him. He hit the earth with a bone-crushing thud, and everything went dark. Word parachute comes from two French words, para, meaning to protect, and chute, meaning fall. It promised to help people fall safely, like a shield against gravity's pull. But this idea didn't come easily. It wasn't a soft or quiet invention. It was born from bold dreams and risky experiments, a true test of courage and human willpower. Louis-Sébastien Lenormand was born in 1757 in Montpellier. His father was a clockmaker, and by the time Louis was 10 years old, he was already working in his father's shop. He loved fixing clocks and watches, especially the way every tiny piece worked together to keep time. The ticking of the clocks, the smooth movement of the gears, and the delicate design of each watch fascinated him. He was always happy working on them, and every little detail caught his attention. One day, while working outside in the shop, something amazing caught his eye. A man was walking on a tightrope high above the street, balancing with an umbrella. Louis watched in awe, amazed at how carefully the man moved. That's when an idea began to form in his mind. What if people could fall from great heights and still land safely? Louis couldn't stop thinking about the tightrope walker and his idea. He decided to try something for himself. He started tying ropes and cloth to heavy objects, then dropping them from the roof of their house to see what would happen. His father noticed his curiosity and, with a kind smile, said, "If you really want to make a difference with your ideas, you need to study science." Inspired by his dream, Louis worked hard to learn more. From 1775 to 1780, he traveled to Paris and studied physics and chemistry under famous scientists like Antoine Lavoisier and Claude Louis Berthollet. What Louis learned in school helped him a lot later on when he started working on his big idea. While studying, he became fascinated by the idea of flying. He started thinking about ways to slow down a fall, like how birds glide gently to the ground. He worked on experiments to understand how falling works, and if it was possible to make it safer. Louis had always dreamed of flying. Since he was a little kid, he believed the sky wasn't just for birds. He spent years designing a parachute, but every time he tried, it didn't work. Still, his curiosity kept him going, and soon he earned a place at a big university. There, he learned from some of the smartest people of the time, like Isaac Newton, George Cayley, and Benjamin Franklin. His studies helped him understand more about science, and he used that knowledge to design a way to slow down a fall safely. He even worked with saltpeter and gunpowder, where math and chemistry helped him understand the world better. His education gave him the tools he needed to create something truly amazing. But when Louis showed his parachute idea to his professors, they didn't take him seriously at all. Who would ever need something like that, they laughed. People don't fly through the air. His idea was rejected, and it felt like the whole world was turning against him. The professors told him to stop wasting his time, saying it was impossible. No one believed in him. He even tried to get help from other scientists, but they all dismissed him, saying his idea was foolish. When he asked for funding to keep going, they just shook their heads and turned away. Louis felt heartbroken. Every time he faced a new door, it slammed in his face. He worked harder than ever, but it seemed like failure was the only thing he got in return. No one cared about his dream, and it made him wonder if he would ever be able to prove them wrong. The harsh words from the professors stung, but Louis wasn't the type to give up. He decided to keep going, even though everyone had turned their back on him. After leaving the university, he kept experimenting. First, he tried his parachute on small animals like birds and rabbits. He made sure to carefully craft each parachute, hoping it would work. Again and again, his tests failed. The animals fell too fast, or the parachutes didn't open. But Louis didn't stop. He kept fixing and refining his design. Finally, after many tries, the parachutes worked. The animals landed safely, and Louis felt a spark of hope. Encouraged by his success, he decided it was time to test it himself. Louis didn't stop testing his parachute. He tried again and again, making sure every detail was perfect. He tested it on animals first, then carefully adjusted the design and tested it again. Finally, he was sure it would work. Louis knew this was his chance to show the world his invention. He began telling everyone about his big plan, inviting people to watch his first jump. He announced a special day when he would leap from a tall tower with his parachute and show everyone that it worked. The news spread quickly, and soon people from all over came to see if this crazy idea could really save someone from falling. Some were excited, but others thought it was too dangerous, laughing at the idea of someone jumping from such a height. Despite their doubts, Louis kept preparing. He worked hard to make sure everything was just right. His parachute, the jump spot, even his own safety. He practiced over and over, determined to make it a success. The day was drawing near, and Louis knew this was his moment to prove that his invention could change the world. As the day of his big jump approached, Louis's father, his sister, and even his friends tried to stop him. They told him it was too dangerous. You could get hurt. Please don't do it, his father begged, his face filled with worry. His sister, too, was scared. I had a bad dream last night, she said, her voice trembling. Something bad is going to happen when you jump. But Louis wouldn't listen. His mind was made up. He believed in his invention, and nothing could change that. Despite their fears and warnings, Louis smiled and reassured them. I've prepared for this. It's going to work. So, on the day of the jump, with his heart racing, Louis walked confidently out of his house, ignoring his sister's unsettling dream. As he made his way to the showground, the weight of the moment hung heavy on his shoulders. The crowd would be waiting, but deep down, Louis was ready to prove them all wrong. When Louis arrived at the showground, he was taken aback by the huge crowd that had gathered. People from all over the town, and even from far away, had come to see the man who was about to jump from a tower with his parachute. The crowd buzzed with excitement, but also with doubt. Some were cheering, eager to see history made, while others whispered nervously among themselves, questioning if this crazy idea could really work. He's going to fall and get hurt, one person shouted. This is madness. People aren't meant to fly, another disagreed. But there were others who believed in him. He's a genius, they said. This could change everything. Louis looked around, surprised by how many people were watching, and the mix of emotions was overwhelming. Some were excited to see him succeed, while others seemed ready to watch him fail. He could hear the debates and arguments among the crowd, some saying the invention was brilliant, while others insisted it was too dangerous. But no matter the doubts, Louis stood tall, his heart racing. This was his moment to prove everyone wrong. As Louis stood before the crowd, he decided to give them more than just a jump. He wanted to show them everything his inventions could do. With a proud smile, he started demonstrating some of his other creations, much to the crowd's amazement. He showed them a series of smaller inventions he had worked on over the years, clever gadgets, and machines that helped with everyday tasks. But then, to really prove the parachute's worth, he brought out animals. One by one, he showed how small birds, rabbits, and even a few other creatures had safely fallen from great heights using his parachute design. The crowd watched in awe as the animals floated gently to the ground, landing safely, their little parachutes opening perfectly. Louis's confidence grew as the crowd's doubts slowly began to fade. But just as he was finishing his demonstration, the weather suddenly began to change. Dark clouds rolled in, and the wind picked up, causing a chill to run through the air. It was his turn now, no more waiting. The crowd hushed, and Louis could feel the weight of their eyes on him. This was it. He was about to prove that his parachute would work, just like he had shown with the animals. The wind howled, but Louis didn't flinch. He stepped forward, ready to make history. Although the weather wasn't looking good, with dark clouds gathering and the wind picking up, the crowd wanted more. They wanted to see Louis take the leap, to prove that his invention could really work. Louis could feel the pressure building. They had come all this way to see him succeed, and he couldn't let them down, not now. The air was cold, and the wind howled louder with each passing moment, but Louis knew this was the moment he had been waiting for. He couldn't make excuses. It was time to prove to everyone, including himself, that his parachute was more than just a dream. Without hesitation, Louis began to climb the towering structure. Each step felt heavier than the last, but his determination pushed him forward. The crowd watched in silence as he reached the top, the wind tugging at his clothes. Standing at the very edge, he took a deep breath. The world seemed to hold its breath with him. And then, without looking back, Louis jumped. Hours later, Louis woke up in a hospital bed. His head hurt, his body ached, and the bright lights above him made his eyes sting. He looked around, still dizzy. A nurse named Eleanor was beside him, gently taking care of his wounds. "You're lucky to be alive," she said softly. Louis groaned, feeling frustrated. "But I failed again." Eleanor looked at him with concern. "What were you thinking, jumping from that height?" she asked. Louis gave a weak smile. "I was testing my invention," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Eleanor shook her head, still tending to him. "Why do you keep doing this to yourself?" she asked. Louis smiled faintly. "Because I believe in it. One day, this will save lives." Eleanor listened carefully to him. She understood how important his invention was, even if no one else did. "Maybe you need someone who knows how to show people why it matters," she suggested gently. "Failure is just another step toward success," she said. "But you nearly tested yourself to death," she added with a worried look. After surviving his disastrous test, Louis found himself torn between the pain in his body and the burning need to keep going. Even though his legs were still sore and he could barely walk without wincing, Louis didn't waste any time. The very moment he returned home, he hobbled straight into his workshop, ignoring the aching in his bones. He didn't wait for the pain to go away, he couldn't. His mind was focused on his invention, and he was determined to fix everything that had gone wrong. He spent hours working on his parachute, even though his legs felt like they might give way at any moment. With each step, his muscles screamed in protest, but his heart urged him on. He couldn't stop now. Louis carefully studied every part of his invention, rethinking each detail, adjusting the ropes, the fabric, and the structure. He worked tirelessly, even through the late nights, his hands shaking with exhaustion, but still determined to make it work. The room was filled with the sound of tools clinking, fabric being pulled tight, and Louis muttering to himself as he focused on making the parachute stronger, safer, and more reliable. He was completely absorbed in his work, so much so that he barely noticed how much time passed or how sore his body had become. The idea of flying and proving everyone wrong was all that mattered. Days turned into weeks, and Louis never stopped, no matter how hard or painful the work was. The only thing that kept him going was the vision of the parachute working, finally letting him soar through the sky safely. After days, weeks, and months of tireless work and experimenting, Louis finally did it. His legs still ached from the fall, and the pain hadn't fully gone away. But none of that mattered anymore. His workshop was a mess of tools, cloth, and ropes, but in the middle of all that chaos was something incredible: the final version of his parachute. It was a masterpiece, carefully designed and built with every mistake he'd learned from. He had made sure that everything was perfect this time. The ropes were stronger, the fabric was smoother, and the frame was sturdier. He was sure that this parachute would work, and he was ready to prove it. For weeks, Louis worked with tireless focus, adjusting this and tweaking that. He barely noticed how his body felt from all the long hours of labor. His mind was consumed by the idea of making his parachute a success. Finally, the day arrived. He had done it. The parachute was ready for its second test. Louis knew he couldn't keep this achievement to himself. He wanted the world to see his success, especially after his first failure. So, he sent out invitations to everyone, friends, scientists, and anyone who had doubted him before. "Come and witness this," he wrote. "I fixed it. This time, my parachute will work." He felt a mix of excitement and nerves. It wasn't just another test. This was his moment to show everyone that he had succeeded where others thought he would fail. When Louis sent out the second invitation, many of the same people who had witnessed his first failure were skeptical. Some were still shaken by the memory of his disastrous attempt, and they wondered if this time would be any different. A few rolled their eyes, muttering to each other, "Is he really going to try again?" After what happened last time, there were whispers among the crowd when the news spread. He's really going to test it again. Does he think the parachute will work this time? The doubt was thick in the air. Some had been embarrassed for him the first time, and they didn't want to see him fail again. Maybe he should just give up, one person remarked quietly, not wanting to get their hopes up. However, a few people were more curious than before. "I'll go just to see if he's really fixed it," one person said. "If he's made improvements, it could be something worth watching." Even though they had doubts, there was a small flicker of hope in some of their hearts, a tiny spark of belief that maybe, just maybe, Louis had figured it out. Some even felt a bit guilty for laughing at him the first time. They knew that he had put his heart and soul into the invention. It would be nice to see him succeed, one woman admitted, though she didn't sound entirely sure. But for the most part, the crowd was divided. Some were cautiously hopeful, others were more skeptical, and a few just came out of pure curiosity, eager to see what would happen this time. But no one could deny the tension in the air. Everyone wondered, would Louis succeed, or would he fall once again? The Tower of Montpellier, a stone sentinel piercing the azure canvas, its shadow stretching long and ominous. A crowd had gathered below, their eyes fixed on the lone figure climbing the tower. Louis, still limping slightly with one leg, took each step carefully, his heart pounding. People whispered in hushed voices, some expressing doubt, others hoping that this time would be different. Some looked on with curiosity, while others couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for the man who had failed so many times before. As Louis reached the top, the wind howled around him, pulling at his cloak and the parachute strapped to his back. The crowd stood in a collective hush, their breath held in anticipation. Louis paused at the edge of the tower, looking down at the sea of faces below. For a moment, it felt like the world stood still. He could hear his heartbeat in his ears. With determination in his eyes, he stepped forward, preparing for the leap that would either break him or make him. Then he jumped. The parachute opened with a slight jerk, the wind catching it like a giant bird's wings. Slowly, he began to float down, his body swaying gently in the breeze. The crowd watched in stunned silence at first, their eyes wide with disbelief. Then, as Louis descended safely, something shifted. A wave of emotion swept through the crowd. A young girl gasped and clutched her mother's arm, her face lighting up with awe. An older man wiped away a tear, shaking his head in amazement. People clapped their hands, their faces bursting with joy and disbelief. Laughter and cheers filled the air, mingled with shouts of "Bravo, and you did it." A few people even cried out in joy, as though they had witnessed a miracle. The energy was electric, as if the impossible had just become reality. Louis had done it. He had defied the odds, and in that moment, he had become a symbol of hope and perseverance. The crowd's cheers echoed in his ears as he touched the ground softly, their applause lifting his spirit higher than any height he had ever reached before. Then something amazing happened. Newspapers started talking about Louis, and everyone began to see how brilliant he was. The scientists who had once laughed at him now called him a genius. Radio stations excitedly told stories about the man who had figured out how to conquer the sky. Louis's invention was no longer just something strange. It was something that could save lives. People everywhere started to realize how important the parachute was, and it changed the way we travel through the air forever. The crowd below, a mosaic of stunned faces, watched as the impossible unfolded before them. The word parachute resonated through the air, a testament to human ingenuity and courage. Lenormand had not merely demonstrated a device. He had shattered the illusion of human helplessness against the forces of nature. The workshop is filled with tools, papers, and models of the parachute. Louis, weary and frustrated, sits at a table, his hands resting on his head. His best friend, Pierre, a kind and thoughtful man, stands near the window, watching the bustling streets below. "Louis," with a heavy sigh, I've done everything I can, Pierre. I've proven it works, but people are terrified. They see it as a death trap, not a lifesaver. I can't even get them to try it. Pierre turns to Louis, shaking his head sadly. But you've shown them, Louis. You jumped from the tower and you survived. You've saved lives already. Why don't they see that? Thanks for watching. I hope you are enjoying this video. Creating each video takes me a very long time and a lot of energy. From writing the script, carefully selecting and placing images, to editing every detail and finally uploading. It's a whole process done with passion, just for you. If you enjoy the video, you can support me by subscribing, commenting, liking, or sharing. It won't cost you anything. It's completely free. At the end, please score the video from 0 to 10, where 0 is the lowest and 10 is the highest. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what you liked, what could be better, and what you think should be added or removed. Your feedback while you watch means the world to me and helps me keep making content you love. Thanks for watching, and I can't wait to bring you more great videos soon. Louis stands up, pacing back and forth. They don't see the truth. They see fear. People are afraid of what they don't understand. A man with a strange invention that makes them fall from the sky. It's too much for them. They don't want to imagine the worst happening, falling, even if it means saving their own lives. Pierre, gently, but the need is there. The dangers of air travel, the soldiers in war. These inventions could save so many lives. Louis pauses, looking out the window, voice soft. I know, but fear is stronger than logic. When I show them, when I demonstrate it, they just back away. They're too scared to believe in something new. What if they fall with it? What if it doesn't work for them? Pierre steps closer to Louis. You can't make them understand overnight. But what if they saw it more? What if you could show them the value, the real difference it could make? Maybe it needs more than just one demonstration. Louis, bitter laugh. You think I haven't tried? I've offered it to the military, to the air travelers, even to the circus performers. But everyone looks at it and says, not for me. People are stubborn, Pierre. They're not ready to trust the unknown. Pierre looks down thoughtfully. Sometimes the world isn't ready for what we bring to it. But that doesn't mean we stop. It means we keep trying, finding new ways to show them, to prove it to them. Maybe it's not about convincing them all at once. Maybe it's about finding the ones who'll listen. The ones who will help you show the rest. Louis, his shoulders slump, voice full of frustration. I don't know how much longer I can keep going. It's like running in circles, Pierre. I've given everything to this invention, and yet it feels like it's never enough. Pierre puts a hand on Louis's shoulder earnestly. It's never easy, Louis. True change never is. But when the world is ready, when it finally sees the value of what you've created, it will be worth it. You can't give up now. Think of all the people who will be saved one day because of you. Louis looks at Pierre, eyes filled with a mixture of hope and doubt. You really believe that? That one day someone will see this and understand what I've been trying to do. Pierre smiles, gently nodding. I do, and I'll be here with you every step of the way. Louis smiles faintly, a flicker of determination returning. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's just a matter of time. Louis walks over to his workbench, staring at the models of his parachute. There's a brief moment of silence as he runs his fingers over the cloth. Louis, softly, more to himself. I can't let it die here. Not after all this. Pierre, gently encouraging. No, you won't. Louis had put everything he had into his invention, but selling it was no easy task. Everywhere he went, people were scared of it. The thought of jumping from great heights with a strange contraption strapped to their backs terrified them. They couldn't see how something so unusual could actually save lives. Louis felt frustrated and defeated, and for a while, he thought about giving up. But then, just when he was about to lose hope, something amazing happened. He met a businessman named André-Jacques Garnerin. Unlike everyone else, André believed in Louis's invention. He saw the genius in it and believed it could change the world. Together with his wife, they decided to show the world just how incredible the parachute really was. They arranged spectacular demonstrations, but this time, they added something special. They brought in acrobats and gymnasts to leap from tall towers, using the parachute as they spun and twirled through the air. It was like watching a dance in the sky. People were amazed. Slowly, the fear turned into wonder. What was once a strange idea became something everyone wanted to see, and soon, the parachute wasn't just a curiosity. It was a revolutionary invention that saved lives, not just in the military, but in aviation too. Louis had proven the world wrong, and his invention was going to change everything. While Louis worked tirelessly in his workshop designing new and improved parachutes, his business partner, André-Jacques Garnerin, and his wife took to the streets, showcasing the amazing invention. They held thrilling shows that amazed audiences everywhere. People gathered in huge crowds, eyes wide with excitement, as the parachutes floated gracefully to the ground. The shows were so captivating that demand for the parachutes skyrocketed. Soon, they were able to produce enough parachutes to meet the growing need, and what started as an idea no one believed in turned into a life-saving tool that people couldn't get enough of. Louis and his partner's hard work and vision were finally paying off, and their parachutes were everywhere, changing the way people thought about safety in the sky. Once Louis had been ignored and laughed at by the scientists, but now, everyone saw how brilliant he truly was. His parachute became a shining example of what humans could accomplish with creativity and courage. With his invention success, Louis finally found the recognition he deserved, and with money and fame, he and his family could finally live happily and peacefully.